So glad to be here. It's an honor, a pleasure. I'm Leila Sterenberg, journalist, senior fellow at SEBRI. And I'm looking forward to this debate. I think it's going to be a very fruitful discussion. And I welcome you all. I remind you, and I will remind you later, that we're going to have a cocktail after the discussion at Casa do Saulo, but I'll remind you once we are done talking. And I invite Ambassador Pietro Lazzari for his opening remarks. Please.
Boa tarde, muito obrigado. Sou Pietro Lazzari, embaixador da Suíça no Brasil. Good evening, buonasera, guten Abend. Monsieur le conseiller fédéral Guy Parmelin, secretário Maurício Lírio, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, amigos e amigas da Suíça e do Brasil, I'm very pleased to welcome you to this extraordinary place in Rio de Janeiro, na cidade maravilhosa. And after Sao Paulo and Brasilia, this is the third leg, our journey and the official visit of Minister Parmelin and delegation. And tonight we're going to have the privilege of addressing issues that are very important, not only at the bilateral level, but also beyond. We will explore together links and challenges and the potential of economy, trade, innovation, sustainability, and free trade. Our countries, company, and people want and need to trade with each other, take advantage of best practices, new ideas, and move forward together. How can we promote and strengthen this? How can we ensure that this exchange is as free as possible without unnecessary burden? And how can we ensure that this takes place in a fair and balanced way, especially by promoting sustainable development for all parties involved? Well, to have this discussion, we have chosen a symbolic space, o Museu do Amanhã, the Museum of Tomorrow, and I'm sure that this place is going to inspire and project Swiss-Brazilian relation into the future. To introduce the debate, we have the chance of having Federal Councillor Guy Parmelin and the Secretary for Economic and Financial Affairs, Ambassador Maurício Lírio. Federal Councillor Parmelin is accompanied by a large business and scientific delegation, which exactly is focusing on the strengthening of our excellent relation with Brazil in various fields: trade, science, innovation, infrastructure, and so on and so forth. And I think that the richness and diversity of the delegation is really emblematic of the diversity and the depth of our bilateral relation. This mission has been stressing the common feature running through the relation between Switzerland and Brazil. So Switzerland is here to contribute to solution with Brazilian partners by working in an important triangle: economy, innovation, and sustainability. Because we are indeed convinced that growth has to be linked to sustainability in order to preserve the future. And the potential of strengthening trade, investment, and cooperation between Switzerland. Swiss people are modest, but since 12 years, we have been number ones in terms of innovation. And Brazil, a green superpower, is really huge. So before giving the floor to the Federal Council, I would like to thank the SEBRI for the great cooperation in organizing this event. This is the second high-level event that we are preparing together. And I also thank the panelists to being here tonight, and also Ambassador Lírio for being here tonight. I think we are in Rio, and we very much hope to continue the cooperation with Itamaraty in view of the G20 that will take place next year with the Brazilian presidency. So I wish you all an exciting discussion, and I hand over to you, Federal Councillor Guy Parmelin. Thank you very much.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, boa tarde. C'est juste? C'est bien. Ça commence bien. It is my great pleasure to welcome you at this extraordinary place. The Museum of the Future is symbolic of my official visit to Brazil, which has taken me from Sao Paulo via Brasilia to Rio de Janeiro. I traveled to Brazil accompanied by an important official and a business delegation to set the course of the future of the multifaceted relations between our countries. Switzerland and Brazil enjoy historical and intense relations. 200 years ago, the first Swiss communities settled themselves right in the state of Rio de Janeiro. These relations are particularly dynamic in the key areas under the responsibility of my ministry, the Economy, Trade, Science, Research and Innovation. Brazil is Switzerland's most important trading partner in Latin America, while Switzerland is one of the top 10 investors in Brazil. In the field of science and innovation, our countries and relevant Brazilian and Swiss institutions work closely together. Within the framework of the bilateral agreement of 2009, we also engage in regular dialogue and initiatives. Our countries also cooperate in the field of sustainable development. Yesterday in Brasilia, I had the privilege of announcing Switzerland's future support for the Amazon Fund. This will complement and strengthen existing Swiss commitments, such as the Amazon Bioeconomy and Forest Management Fund of the IDB or the UNDP Green Commodities Programme. The protection and sustainable use of Brazil's natural resources is of immense importance and at the same time also holds great potential. So even so, we already have excellent and diverse relations, and the exchange between our two countries is strong. We are constantly looking for further improvements. From Switzerland's perspective, the free trade agreement between EFTA and Mercosul, which has been finalized in substance in 2019, is an instrument to further expand the great cooperation potential between our two countries. In addition to strengthening trade relations, the agreement will also have a positive impact on dimensions such as technology exchange, innovation, and sustainable development. By concluding free trade agreements, Switzerland aims to provide its companies with access to international markets and increase prosperity in all participating countries. A free trade agreement also means easier exchange of technology, which not least benefits environmental protection and sustainable development. For Switzerland, it is fundamentally important within the framework of a coherent foreign policy to meet the goals of sustainable development in its foreign economic policy as well. We strive for a win-win situation which should enable growth in all countries that is compatible with the goals of sustainable development. For this reason, Switzerland also aims to anchor provisions on environmental protection and the protection of workers in its agreements. This is also very relevant due to the peculiarities of Switzerland's direct democratic system. The acceptance of a free trade agreement is nowadays often subject to a popular referendum. We have seen in recent years that the Swiss people have become visibly more sensitive to issues such as climate change, environmental protection, inequality, and social justice. The agreement between EFTA and Mercosul would only find a majority if our citizens are convinced that it will also benefit the population and respect the environmental of the Mercosul countries. This is the reason why Switzerland stands ready to support, in partnership with our Brazilian partners and friends, a coherent and robust sustainability agenda. I am now looking forward to the forthcoming panel discussion, which will explore these issues in greater depth. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our partner, the Brazilian Center for International Relations, for jointly organizing this event with us. Without further ado, I now hand over to Sebri. Thank you for your attention.
Merci, Ministre. Thank you so much. And now I invite to the floor Ambassador Mauricio Lírio, Secretary of Economic and Financial Affairs of the Brazilian Ministry of External Relations.
Good evening. I'd like to salute Mr. Federal Councillor. It's a pleasure to meet you again. We had the opportunity to have wonderful meetings yesterday with the Vice President Alckmin, with the Foreign Minister Mauro Vieira. It was a pleasure to be with you. Ambassador Chu, it's a pleasure also to salute all the business community of Switzerland. It's a good sign that Brazil is again attracting so many visitors and especially focused on the economic relations between our countries. Mr. Federal Councillor and the Ambassador have already spoken about the bilateral relations between Brazil and Switzerland. Of course, we are in good shape, but we have a potential to be in even a better situation in terms of trade and investment, but we have a very good starting point. And I'll try to concentrate in another issue that I think that it's one of the most topics of most interest of some of the businessmen here, also of the government of Switzerland. The Federal Councillor yesterday said very wisely that we have to go straight to the point. And I know that one of the most important points here is the question of the negotiation of the agreement between Mercosur and EFTA. And you know that this week Brazil has started its presidency in Mercosur. We have a 6-month term of presidencies in Mercosur. Brazil has started in the summit of Iguazu this week. Of course, we have a very ambitious external agenda for Mercosur. We have some agreements that we are negotiating, some of them in an advanced state, and some others which are in the beginning. But the orientation of Brazil in that sense is that in our presidency, we want to push for progress in some of the agreements that we are negotiating. And some of the agreements that we are negotiating that are advanced include the agreement with EFTA. Indeed, we have 3 agreements in which we have, I would say, some pre-negotiated text by 2019. It's the case of the agreement with the European Union. It's the case of the agreement with EFTA. It's the case of the agreement of Mercosur and Singapore. And of course, we would like to profit from this progress made before. And in that sense, I think that in the case of EFTA, we have, and I'm going straight to the point, directly to the point, I think that first we have to solve some unfinished business that we have still from 2019. They are not that much, but they are important. We have some questions in terms, I'll be very technical here, in terms of rules of origin, accumulation. We have some issues regarding geographical indications. We have some aspects of market access that were not completely finalized by that time. And at the same time, as the Federal Councillor has said, we need to be very perceptive, attentive to the new, I would say, claims that our societies are presenting now. The question of the environment is crucial. It's good that we have two governments very convergent on the idea that the environment, the protection of the environment is a priority. This is a very good sign. We have this convergence between the 4+4 countries, EFTA and Mercosul. So we have to discuss this issue. I like the idea of intelligent solutions, as was mentioned yesterday. And we have to find a way to, I would say, to answer to these needs that our populations are expressing in those issues. Brazil has also, and Mercosur countries have also some aspects that they want to discuss that, in a way, are new if we compare to the 2019 context that we had before. It's not only the fact that the climate urgency became so evident, it's also evident that after the pandemics, which happened after the negotiation of 2019, we have some concerns, and we are seeing in the discussions internationally about supply chains and the need of reliance on supply for important sectors like health and other ones. So we have also to reflect those changes in the adequate way to face the challenge that our societies are claiming nowadays. So it's not an easy job to do all that, but I think it's feasible. And you can count on Brazil in this presidency to be very active in terms of trying to achieve these. We are eager to have negotiations. We are doing some review in our government about the agreements, as we did and we have done in the case of the European Union, as you have seen by the declarations of President Lula. But we are very serious in the idea that we need to advance in those aspects. And of course, this would be a fantastic instrument for not only the bi-regional relations, but specifically for Brazil and Switzerland, because we are the largest countries in each of the two groups, largest countries in terms of economic power and international trade, the weight of international trade. So it would be very beneficial to the relations between Brazil and Switzerland. So this is the main message that I would like to convey. About the bilateral relations, of course, they are crucial for us. The relation between Brazil and Switzerland goes beyond the question of the excellent economic relations that we have. Brazil and Switzerland have many partnerships internationally in terms of the support for international law, the rule of law, and international organizations. They have a very good tradition in terms of supporting multilateralism and making international law and international organizations even stronger against, I would say, violations of international rules and so on. So it's, I would say, a large tradition that we have between Brazil and Switzerland, besides the presence of the community that we have, the example of Nova Friburgo, and we discussed this yesterday. So I think it's a very prosperous relation, and I'm very hopeful that we are going to have more advances in the near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. And now I invite to the floor Luiz Ildefonso Simões Lopes, Vice President of the Board of Trustees at SEBRE and Vice President of Brookfield, Brazil, for his introductory words.
Well, good evening, everyone. On behalf of SEBRE, I'd like to welcome all the participants of today's event. And we are here today to share perspectives on the relations between Switzerland and Brazil in order to identify opportunities to foster our nation's development and prosperity. Before continuing this short introduction, I'd like to thank you, all partners at the Embassy and Consulate Generals of Switzerland, as well as Museu do Amanhã, Instituto de Desenvolvimento e Gestão e Secretaria da Cultura da Prefeitura do Rio, for hosting this panel. It's thanks to valuable partnerships like these that SEBRI is the main independent think tank for international relations in Brazil and the second most relevant in South and Central America. With a wide, influential, and plural network of experts, SEBRI aims to offer innovative and multidisciplinary solutions to relevant and current issues, networking with decision makers in the government, academia, and the private sector to influence the formation and formulation of public policies aimed at promoting Brazil's international agenda. We have a vast network of associate members, and since last year, Switzerland has joined this group. Today's event marks a new chapter in our partnership and highlights the mutual commitment to engage in robust discussion and cooperate on matters of international importance. Our first joint initiative was a webinar on Brazil and Switzerland mandates on the Security Council that showcased the experience of both countries in promoting peace and the challenges and opportunities related to doing it in the multilateral framework. It also aimed to analyze the opportunities for cooperation between Brazil and Switzerland in the Security Council, in which the two countries are present as non-permanent members in the current year. Today's event is the second initiative taking place in the context of Minister Guy Parmelin's visit to Brazil, and I look forward to the longevity of this partnership and sincerely hope we can promote many more initiatives in the long run. As already mentioned, Switzerland and Brazil established relations in the earliest of the 19th century. This story of migration to the new Freiburg, I have a personal relationship with this. I spent 5 years in a boarding school in the city of Nova Friburgo, and it's funny, even being, I would say, living in Brazil, in Ipanema, living in beachfront, I love these 5 years in the boarding school. And as much as I have my cottage in Nova Friburgo, in the last 40 years, I have been engaged in that city and in that community. And in general, people in Brazil when associate boarding schools to bad experience. Mine was good. The origin of the decision of going to the boarding school was not mine, of course, was my father, and it was very bad because I was attending at that time a Catholic school in Rio, and I did not pass in religion. Yes, and my father said, if it was mathematics, I could understand. I wouldn't accept, I could understand. But religion, you go to a boarding school. So, but it was a great experience for me because it was a special school that if on one side I was not in front of the beach, I was not surfing anymore daily, I had all the liberty of being almost 150 kilometers from my parents, and in an age that this makes enormous difference. So the economic and trade relations between Switzerland and Brazil are also significant value, as already mentioned, with Switzerland imported goods for 1.6 billion Swiss francs from Brazil, mainly precious metals, agricultural products, etc. But at the same time, Brazil is the most important destination to Swiss exports in Latin America. So both nations have unique strengths that complement each other, creating a fertile ground to increase trade, shared prosperity, and mutual growth. The ongoing negotiations for a free trade agreement between EFTA and Mercosul could fundamentally transform our trade relations. It's natural, all the difficulties, and there's a natural difficulties and issues, but this agreement would offer an unprecedented opportunity for both sides to explore and capitalize on our respective competitive advantages. Free trade, of course, is not about only exchanging goods and services. It can also stimulate innovation, provide access to technologies vital for environmental protection and sustainable development. In today's interconnected world, current foreign trade policy must also encompass sustainable development goals. This dimension is an integral part of our ongoing negotiations for the free trade agreement between EFTA and Mercosul, and we understand that true progress only comes when economic growth and sustainability go hand in hand. As we delve into the topics today, it's important to remember that our goal is to create a future that is not just prosperous, but also sustainable and inclusive. Thank you for your attention. Sorry for my voice. And I would like to excuse myself that I won't be able to stay too much at the cocktail because I'll have to take a flight tonight to San Francisco, California. So I would have to go to the airport. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and have a nice trip. So, and I invite to the floor for the presentations Ruth Metzler-Arnold, President of the Switzerland Global Enterprise and former Minister of Justice of Switzerland, Matthias Leuenberger, Vice President of Economia Suisse, President of Science Industries, or Science Industrie, and President of Novartis Switzerland, Igor Celeste, Market Intelligence Manager at Apex Brasil, Giorgio Luigi Rossi, Coordinator of Fuja International, and the moderator, Winston Fritsch, last but not least, Trustee Emeritus at SEBRI. Please come to the floor.
May I? Good evening. If this screen was a window, you would see Luiz Alfonso Simões Lopes boarding school in the mountains. Oh, if there was daylight. It's not very far from here. Everybody mentioned Nova Friburgo. And it's a landmark. It's very important in the relation between our countries. And I'll start with that. I'm sorry because I'll be over-laboring this point, which was mentioned again. But this is amazing because at that time, Rio was the capital of the Portuguese Empire. I'm talking about 1819 or 1820. They left and arrived here. The King of Portugal had fled Portugal from the Napoleon troops under British protection and set up the capital of the empire in Rio and allowed the coming of the migrants from Freiburg, and they were the first settlers, first non-Portuguese settlers in Brazil. This is an amazing thing. There was no precedent. They settled and they thrived, and after many years, Switzerland was not Switzerland yet. The constitution that created what you are as a state today dates from, I think, 1848, based on the revolutions of the mid-19th century. Brazil was not an independent country, but all this time we evolved immensely and created two amazing countries. I mean, Switzerland is amazing by any standards that you measure. I mean, it's an incredible example of post-war growth, and from a very poor origin. At this time that the Swiss came to Brazil, They came because of running away from famine, from poverty. And now you have a per capita income of, above $80,000, bigger, well above the average in Europe. An economy that is very competitive in many sectors, and a democracy from, the origin. Is a fundamental democracy. Brazil, through ups and downs, now today, is a huge multiracial democracy, a country of the size of the continental United States, and with very much things that unite these two countries, so different, but so united. There are over 300 companies, Swiss companies in Brazil today, and fundamentally, we are like-minded. It's strange, but we are. We have the principles are more or less the same. The Brazilian government is now aligned with the country with a tremendous move towards climate policy as a priority, which I think is an European and particularly a Swiss priority as well. And we are a democracy. So these are two fundamental things on which we can build things together. There are issues on the table, obviously technical cooperation, climate policy, and the free trade agreement are big issues. But I think that the free trade agreement is perhaps the less complicated issue. Obviously, there are issues if you look at Mercosul as a whole, there's the Argentina wine, etc. But there's so many gains for both countries. And you also have a gain of accelerating the discussions and closing the agreement ahead of the European Union because of trade diversion effect. So I think we can give an example by accelerating this negotiation. So here we're going to discuss fundamentally technical cooperation, trade, and climate moving forward. Shall I start with? Well, following the order here, with roots.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everybody. I'd like to start with some reflections, what we have learned throughout the week. Throughout this week, we have heard a lot about the huge potential and the ambitions in infrastructure and sustainability in this country. And indeed, Brazil has become more attractive for Swiss companies in the past year due to geopolitical tensions and also supply chain disruptions in other parts of the world. Therefore, Latin America in general is receiving more attention. That's what we clearly see at the Switzerland Global Enterprise, where we support Swiss small and mid-sized companies in their international ventures. This is also reflected actually in the numbers of our support services. Just to mention that last year we almost doubled our consulting meetings compared to 2021. Last year there were nearly 260 companies contacting us for Brazil, get support on Brazil. And Brazil is now in the top 5 countries if we rank the countries on the demands from Swiss SMEs. And that's also why we really know about the opportunities, but also about the pain points Swiss companies face. There is still a huge untapped potential for Swiss companies with their services and products, as well as for Brazilian companies to cooperate with the Swiss ones in order to get access to the technology and the innovation which Swiss companies can bring to the Brazilian market. As an example, Brazilian agriculture products feed 800 million people around the world, and that's really a strong contribution to global food safety and food security. And Swiss technologies in precision farming can enhance productiveness and sustainability. And here, technology is needed, digitization is needed. It's not the classical hardware which is needed, and that's also what the Swiss companies can bring in order to help develop in that sector. Switzerland's engineering and industry is complementary to the strength of Brazil and can further enable the country to become even more productive and more sustainable in the competitive global market. So Swiss technology products and services match very well with the political ambition and the needs of the Brazilian economy, especially in infrastructure, clean tech, medtech, and agri-tech. Another example is green hydrogen. You were talking climate. Green hydrogen. Brazil's plan to become a major producer and trader of green hydrogen has caught the attention of innovative Swiss companies, and several green hydrogen companies joined this economic delegation to understand the specifics and demands of the local market and to meet with potential partners. These examples show sustainability is clearly an opportunity with regard to Brazil as a market and for Brazil to attract Swiss technology and innovation. However, and I think everyone knows about it, Swiss companies often struggle to enter the market because of the complex tax system, regulation, and bureaucracy, and also the delays due to the regulatory system. And this is regrettable because there are just young companies, startup companies, which are very innovative with new technology, and they are hindered the most with such circumstances to really enter the market. There is plenty potential, but especially for the young ones, it's really difficult. But we also see at Switzerland Global Enterprise, even for companies already active in Brazil, they still need quite some support regarding bureaucracy, etc. But maybe you can say more than how you could also help them once they are here. There is another aspect which is important for me, a message which we have to bring to the market. Switzerland stands for high quality products and services. Quality has its price. And so we really have to convince that, yes, maybe higher investment costs at the beginning, but that, and I'm convinced of that, that will translate over time into lower operational costs, and that's how high quality has a price. But in the long run, you have to look at it in a different way. And the last point which I would like to mention, and it has already, thank you very much for your words and the reflections, the free trade agreement. It's not only something for the big companies, for the multinationals. It's also very important for the smaller companies. It would also facilitate some procedures, lower the tariffs, and that's something which is especially for SMEs also a great need. And to summarize on that, I'm convinced that the FTA between Mercosur and the EFTA states, both countries, Switzerland and Brazil, they could strengthen their economic ties with an FTA, and that would be for the benefit of the population in both countries. These as my introductory remarks.
Very good, thank you. I hope that by the end of the cocktail, the Brazilian Congress has voted the tax reform, which will address some of the points she mentioned in passing. Now, Matthias Neuenberger.
So, happy to also say a few introductory remarks. I am a representative of the pharmaceutical industry, and if I paid attention, which I did, then Vice President Alckmin, he also mentioned the importance of the healthcare sector for Brazil, all the outstanding challenges that need to be addressed, and I'm aware that also today, I think in the meeting with the finance minister, also healthcare was mentioned. And needless to say, Switzerland indeed is a powerhouse when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to innovation in the pharmaceutical space. You know that. Just maybe one number. Switzerland exports in goods total around 240 billion. Half of that is actually pharma. Half of that. So more than 100 billion exports stem out of Switzerland. And they go mainly to EU and then also to the US. And then, you know, it starts to trail. And at the lower end, unfortunately, is Brazil. But it is still a significant number. It's 1.2 billion, which is actually half of all exports from Switzerland into Brazil. Now, of course, we want to also make sure that this number grows. And so we are also very much looking forward to this conclusion of the free trade agreement. In fact, you may or may not know, but in actually almost all countries and regions in the world, pharma is not paying any tariffs. That has been abolished. It is part of the WTO pharma agreement, and for good reasons, because it's typically the public that pays for these medications, and you only make them more expensive if you are putting tariffs on it. And of course, it also hinders the, I would say, export of innovation. I will come to that in a second. So we are very much looking also forward to the conclusion of this free trade agreement. In the meantime, I don't know how fast this goes, but anyway, there is obviously also something that is called a mutual recognition agreement. So these are also a bit technical terms, but in essence, it is about accepting the inspections of Switzerland for import of medicines into Brazil. So only at the beginning of this year, in fact, we concluded such an MRA with the US. So State Secretary Budliger, she was very active in this regard, and she managed to sign this. That means there's no more FDA inspection in Switzerland, but the US will accept the inspections that happen in Switzerland. So for us, we would also very much appreciate if such an agreement could be concluded with Brazil. Now, that both aspects obviously relate to the importation of medicines, and that is in itself, of course, already very helpful, very, something that is going to boost also the healthcare sector in Brazil. But I understand you also probably would want to see more investments in the field of research and development. And for us, yes, Brazil is a huge country, I think number 5 in population. You will also see an aging demography, so it's very clear that there is also going to be a huge potential, and it's also obviously an opportunity maybe for research and development activities. However, there I have to say there are a few, say, preconditions that need to happen before such foreign direct investments or investments into research and development activities can happen in any country. So obviously that depends a lot on the skill set. You need really highly skilled people. That is certainly one thing. And then you need a regulatory framework that is adequate to support R&D activities in any country. And if I think of innovation, it's obviously research and development, but if I think of development in the pharmaceutical industry, that by and large means clinical trials. And clinical trials are important. They are not only important for the pharmaceutical industry to get approval for a drug, but they are also helping the healthcare system, the hospitals, the doctors, the opinion leaders, the scientific community to advance science in a given country. So that is a first entry point. And precisely in that respect, what I've been told, there are challenges for clinical trials in Brazil, which is really disappointing actually, because you have 200, 220, 240 million people, and it would be a great place to do clinical trials. It seems that the approval of clinical trials is much slower in Brazil than it is in other countries, and there are additional barriers, so additional criteria that need to be presented to the authorities, and that complicates it a lot. Which means if I look at the ranking of clinical trials, number of clinical trials per capita, Brazil only ranks number 24, but 5th in population, but unfortunately only 24th when it comes to clinical trials. So I think that is one area that needs to be addressed before this becomes very attractive, or could become very attractive for investments in R&D. And the other one, no surprise, and that is very important for us, is IP, intellectual property right. And I'm not going to expand too much on that topic, but again, there's just one number that I have been told, which is a huge backlog in patent applications. More than 100,000 patents are pending approval in Brazil, and it's estimated to take some 10 years to deal with that backlog. And you can imagine that it's difficult for a pharmaceutical, for any industry obviously, to invest a lot of money into research and development when at the end of the day you will not be able to then secure the IPs. So I think at the end of the day we see great potential. We are convinced that the skill set here is right. It's obviously the largest market in Latin America. It would be also a great hub to start, as an entry point to start with R&D activities in Brazil. A few challenges that need to be addressed, but I have confidence in the government who is actively addressing these points, and I'm sure that sooner or later we will hopefully also be seeing R&D activities here in Brazil. With that I close, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Matthias. I have to agree with you that in Brazil, some administrative non-tariff barriers are really binding, and that has to be addressed. And that's not a new problem. It's an old problem. It gets worse. It's cyclical. But I mean, as you say, for instance, in patents, I mean, in property rights, it's sometimes almost ridiculous. Igor Celestino.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, businessmen and authorities. First, I would like to greet all my colleagues in the event and in the panel, especially Ruth. You are from the Switzerland Global Enterprise, our cousin in Switzerland. I represent Apex Brazil, the Brazilian Trade and Investment Promotion Agency. Just try to introduce a little bit about Apex. We are the official agency for international business in Brazil, working in close cooperation with the Ministry of External Relations, and also in close cooperation with the Ministry of Development, Trade and Services. And I'm used to say that we work because of the companies and for the companies. So we have a close connection with the private sector, and I'm here available to exchange cards with you, with all of you if you want, after the event as well, to be more close connected. Currently, we work with more than 50 industries associations in Brazil, and 35 academic institutions besides the governmental bodies. We offer a range of solutions for trade and investment promotion, especially in terms of market intelligence, capacity building for exports, as well as trade promotion, international expansion, foreign direct investments, and image promotion. We work closely with the SMEs as well. Very important in our mission, and the SMEs in Brazil, they represent 70% of all employment in Brazil. So they are very important, and they have the opportunity to be close with the Swiss companies is huge, because we can put together small and medium companies to work in innovative projects and in innovation and sustainability together. In 2022, we supported more than 15,000 companies, and our ecosystem represented 40% of all Brazilian exports to the road, about $130 billion. We have offices in 5 Brazilian regions and 10 international markets. For example, in Europe, we have an office in Brussels, so if you want as well, we can exchange these contacts. We support companies as well going overseas through e-commerce and also startups that are important new lines of work for Apex Brazil. And we bring startups from all parts of the world to connect with our startups. And that's, I think, is a very good opportunity for us to cooperate. In my opening remarks, I would like to stress one thing. Just try to analyze our trade in 2022. Brazil exported more than $1.1 billion to Switzerland, mainly concentrated in gold, 56% of our exports, sugar, 6%, and chicken meat, 4%, which represent 2/3 of our exports to Switzerland. There is a clear need to diversify our sales to Switzerland. On the other hand, Brazil imported $2.4 billion from Switzerland, growing of 10% regarding 2021, mainly concentrated in medicine, pharmaceuticals, for sure, nitrogen, and inorganic chemicals. So I will talk a little bit about potential. Switzerland responds for 0.9% of Brazilian imports, 0.9. But for the world, for the global imports, Switzerland is a provider of 1.7%. Brazil responds for 0.5% of Swiss imports, but for the world, we represent 1.2% of global imports. We provide 1.2% of global exports or to the international markets. Conclusion, we trade much below our potential, even if we compare with our average potential with the world. So we have to go faster and stronger in terms of economic integration. There's no doubt regarding that. And for that, I would say the same as my colleagues regarding the EFTA-Mercosul free trade agreement. I think it's central. It has to be enforced. And we, for example, from the Brazilian side, we will see short-term benefits regarding ethanol, beef meat, chicken meat, sugar, and other agro-industrial products, but also point out the opportunities for manufactured goods, services, investments, and governmental purchases as well. Because the free trade agreement we actually created with EFTA has an important issue of government purchases, which is central even for pharmaceuticals, for example, and other services and other sectors. It would be very good to see as well some bilateral mechanisms to foster environmental sustainability. For example, EFTA in Indonesia, you have, for example, mechanisms to reduce import tariffs for palm oil exported by Indonesian companies compliant with certifications and regulations. This kind of innovative instruments could foster our bilateral relationship and foster economic sustainability. And I would like to stress, as the Ambassador said before, we truly believe trade and investment can promote sustainable development in Amazonia and other sensitive biomes in Brazil. We currently have projects to promote exports from the North region, especially those connected with environments such as acai, Brazil nut, fishery, coffee, tapioca, and among others. And I would like to stress that, as you said in the beginning of the event, to put together economics, put together innovation, put together sustainability that would preserve Amazonia. And that's a very important biome for the globe, for our future generations as well. And we are aware of that, and I think this current government is very aware of the importance of economic sustainability, but also environmental sustainability for the world. So those would be my opening remarks. Thank you, Winston.
You're welcome. Good points, Igor. And now, finally, for the final intervention, Giorgio Luigi Rossi.
Well, thank you so much. And let me begin, Winston, by thanking Ambassador Lazzari And by thanking Ambassador Lattery for this kind invitation, I want to extend all the greetings to the Swiss authorities, Swiss entrepreneurs that are here today with us, and of course, all the Brazilian authorities. I would also like to thank SEBRI for this dialogue, because I think that it's a key moment exactly to talk about these issues that are strategic in terms of promoting this bilateral cooperation and deepening our ties in economical and civil society links between our countries. And well, also my job here today of bringing some of the views of the Rio de Janeiro state industries. I work for FIRJAN, the Industry Federation, particularly at the international department. My job got a lot more easier after such a masterclass from the distinctive colleagues in the panel. But I would like to give some remarks about the fact that we are facing a lot of shifts in our global value chains, and Brazil is, of course, part of that shift. And this has led to a new challenge of how countries and policymakers could have to balance reindustrialization efforts with new arrangements in this global value chain. And moreover, how can we generate wealth, increase cooperation, increase trade in a moment where there are such strong claims of protectionism? So the effort and the struggle is real. Mercosul countries, of course, including Brazil, need to add value, as my colleague said, to their industrial production. So Brazilian industries and, of course, Rio de Janeiro state industries have to avoid early deindustrialization processes and promote, through innovation, improved productivity and efficiency, especially for our small and medium enterprise that are a lot in number, but they participate not so much into our trade, particularly in our exports. And this is not what Switzerland has as a typical scenario. So we know that small and medium Swiss enterprises are very, very participants into the global trade. This effort is needed so that Brazilian business can compete in some cases, and in some cases partner with their Swiss counterparts. And of course, Brazil needs to improve, as has been said before, is business environment. We have a lot to do in terms of homework, particularly, of course, the tax reform. And the Federation of Industry, the National Confederation, is working for the last 20 years, and we hope that maybe tonight we will have some good news in order to this tax reform, not only the tax reform, but also the administrative reform could be put in place in a short term. And of course, there's also the key point of promoting the dialogue between the countries, between civil society and companies, in order to avoid resistance to trade agreements like the EFTA-Mercosul one. And in order to avoid this resistance, what we do at FIRJAN and what we believe is that it's fundamental to strengthen this dialogue between the government parties and, of course, the dialogue with the private sector, in order to clarify every and each question mark that could be we could be having in some sectors regarding a realistic transition in terms of reducing the tax during the timeline of implementation of this agreement. And of course, this is, as we all know, this is a very complex scenario with different numbers in the equation. But of course, it's of great importance to promote those trade agreements that generate wealth for all the parties involved. While also, of course, contemplating local specific conditions and norms of each sectors and countries. There are several symmetries between our countries in economic and business terms, such as different areas of expertise, varying levels of competitiveness, and depending on the sector and the size of the leading companies. What we want to look after is to promote these, not only to recognize these differences, but celebrate in trade agreement these differences with tools that promote a more fair competitivity in the agreement. And at the Brazilian industry, all the Brazilian industry during those more than 10 years of negotiation of the EFTA agreement has positioned itself very favorably throughout the negotiation period of both the negotiation of EFTA and EU agreements. The perspective of commercial openness derived from the agreement is expected to lead to increase the aggregated value of our exports and as well improve access to capital goods, technology and innovation for our companies, which are strongly needed for the modernization of our enterprise. At Firjan, we represent 101 unions that are the business associations from different industrial sectors. And every year we conduct surveys in order to hear from our entrepreneurs about their difficulties into their day-to-day trade operation, and of course what they are aiming in terms of new markets and and increased participation in global supply. And every year for the last 12 years that we've been making this study, last year, for instance, 76% of the respondents affirmed that they are in favor of more trade agreements. And specifically, they mentioned the EFTA agreement and the EU agreement, demonstrating that Rio de Janeiro industries support stronger participation into the global value chain because they recognize the possibility of transforming and evolving and developing in a very sustainable way our economy and our society and our companies. And of course, we have to mention necessarily when talking about the agreement and when talking about our future, and we are here today at Museu Amanhã, about the ESG agenda. And particularly those two agreements are very modern in terms of provisioning the ESG agenda inside the agreement. So we believe at Firjan and the industry that by putting in place this agreement, it's meaning to promote the environment and to promote sustainability in the legal Amazon and in all the biomes in Latin America, in the Mercosul, of course. And Firjan is part of this dialogue because we believe that the ESG agenda has to be promoted in all kind of levels, all kind of sectors in our industry. And since 2008, Firjan is a signatory of the Global Compact from the United Nations. And more recently, we've become a promoting institution of the Global Compact among our companies. And of course, getting more to a conclusion, beyond commerce, we believe that we hope that this agreement can expand beyond their commercial scope to also represent strategic partnership and bilateral and multilateral investments, focusing on new industrialization, innovation, and sustainability. We believe that EFTA countries, and especially the Swiss Confederation, could play a leading role in this dialogue, by being Swiss is already one of the largest investors in the region. But of course, there is nonetheless a lot of untapped potential, as you've said before. In 2022, Brazil was the third country from OECD stats in volume of FDI received, just behind the US and China. And we believe that the Swiss investors could unleash this untapped potential when we talk about this agreement. Our significant trade flow of $3.6 billion last year is important, but there's a lot of room for growth. Switzerland is only 34th largest business part of Brazil. And in Rio de Janeiro, the scenario is a little bit better. It's the 23rd largest business partner. And more significantly, the trade value chain of Rio de Janeiro state with Switzerland is more, there is both in the imports and the exports products, more of the industrial sector. So we have a better and more diversified products in those trade chain. But of course, there is a lot of room to improve. And this is why, in other words, opportunities such as this event tonight are so important and critical to fostering this dialogue and promote these stronger relations between Brazilian and Swiss companies. We also applaud the incredible efforts of the Swiss government in terms of promoting the innovation, because we strongly believe at Firjan that promoting trade and sustainable trade means promoting cooperation into the technical level. And I don't know if you are all acquainted, but in Brazil we have this specific model in which the organization that represents the industries, like the Federation of Industries in Rio and in each state, we also manage to do technical and promote technical skills and technical schools for our labor force. So it's a specific framework that work hand in hand with the public education in order to promote a more technical and skilled workforce in the industry. And of course, when talking about skilled workforce, we have to mention that Rio because of his past as the ancient capital. We have the bigger number proportionally of PhDs in the country. We have the leading universities here that work together with Senai, that is our technical schools. And of course, we have one key sector that is important to Rio de Janeiro State, and we believe that it is important for the Swiss Confederation, that is the health complex industry, led by Fiocruz, of course, that has been it's one of the most important institutions in terms of healthcare in the world, even more important in the last 3 or 4 years. And Firjan is working hand-to-hand with the Ministry of Health and the Fiocruz in order to promote and to attract more investments, both national and international investments into this into this health complex industry in Rio de Janeiro. And of course, when talking about innovation, we have to underline the important effort made by the Swiss government through SwissNext in promoting and strengthening this innovation. SwissNext is a key partner of Firjan, and through our innovation headquarters, that is Casa Firjan, we look forward to deepen our relation with SwissNext and the Swiss companies in terms of innovation and economical cooperation. So please do keep in mind that Rio de Janeiro is open for business, Brazil is open for business, and the Federation is at your disposal when we have to talk about deepening our economical ties and innovation ties. Thank you.
Thank you, Giorgio. Ladies and gentlemen, I think there are at least 4 recurring themes in this 4 interventions. Without order of importance, just by memory, SMEs, small and medium enterprises, innovation, trade, and climate. Let's leave climate for a moment. The other 3 are totally intertwined. Climate change will have the net zero by 2050 will happen with technology we don't know. At least half of the technologies needed are not yet ready. So small and medium enterprises, which are the cradle of these technologies, are fundamental. So cooperation between small and medium enterprises on the field of technology and innovation is very important for climate change. So these priorities must come together. So this is a very, very important piece to be pursued in any follow-on to these meetings. And it's very nice to hear from Ruth that small and medium enterprises and climate investors are presented here in great number. And by the way, just as a footnote, because Ruth mentioned green hydrogen as an important piece, Brazil has a tremendous competitive advantage in the inputs to green hydrogen along the main technology, which is electrolysis. We will produce a huge amount of electrons, green electrons, through wind and solar, because we have not only inland, but offshore, fantastic potential for the production of clean energy, not to speak of biomass. So we will produce a huge quantity, much more than the domestic demands, of green electrons, so we can produce green hydrogen as an export product, not only embedded in ammonia, which can be exported and re-transformed into hydrogen in Europe, but also as an industrial input to make green hydrogen, green fertilizers, etc. So this is certainly a field where the cooperation, if the Swiss are really good at that, but this is the place to be. Now trade. In my first introduction, I mentioned 2 things that unite us. The law for democracy and the commitment to climate change. But there's a third one, which as small trading countries, Brazil is big if you look at the map, but we are small trading countries. Brazil is 1 point whatever of trade, etc. And Brazil is not a satellite of anyone. Brazil is a multilateral country. We have a very balanced pattern of trade. So we hate blocks. We love multilateral disciplines in trade. And obviously, we love trade. And you too. What is Switzerland in terms of economic magic? without free trade, I mean, you'll be doomed. I mean, it was a small country, huge levels of education. Yesterday I saw Zurich is ranked now as the big technical institute there among the first 10 best universities in the world. I mean, you are obviously a country that has tremendous human-made competitiveness, which could only be realized through free trade. You are a product of free trade. As we were very protectionist forever. And I mean, that delayed our growth for a long, long time. So we are actually, it would be very nice if we together, not only are together supporting democracy and the commitment to climate change, but also free trade. And why not begin with an exercise among ourselves? And I come back to my point. Doing that ahead of Europe is good for you, because there are trade diversion effects. That's what economists call, when you have, when you do an agreement, you lower a tariff, the product becomes cheaper, and you divert the products from France or wherever out of Brazil. I mean, it's obviously, because it's very important for you to get together before the other agreements. I mean, it's not a race, but it's good for you. Okay, it's good for you. So the logic here will be, obviously, I'll ask whether the panel wants to make any final remarks. But I'm not seeing here on my schedule any questions from the audience, which I think is not very democratic. So what I will ask is whether any of you would like to make any final comments. Want to say something? What you look like?
Yeah, not a final comment, but just a short comment on a remark Igor made regarding the free trade agreement between EFTA and Indonesia regarding sustainability and palm oil. Actually, that's something we would like to have as a standard also in this free trade agreement, because you were also talking democracy. We had the referendum on the free trade agreement with Indonesia, and actually, although we had this clause, we won very, very tightly. It was just a little bit above 50%. So we can't do anything without this standard. So actually what you said, yes, that's also where we want to go to.
That's a good, this referendum thing that you have is amazing. I mean, it can be distorted as well, because, I mean, you know, today lots of play with fake news, etc. And I saw the criticism from the false Greens against the agreement, because it would increase emissions, because the growth of export from Brazil would increase emissions. This is rubbish. I mean, it's like saying growth will increase emissions if it's with the same technology, with the same production pattern. But if you grow and also diminish emissions per unit of GDP, you can grow and reduce emissions. So trade agreements increases trade. It's nothing to do with emissions. If you do it, obviously, with some disciplines, it's very good. And I welcome disciplines on the Brazilian trade agreement, because I want disciplines on Brazilian policies to increase the compliance with climate change. So it's good. It's a good discipline. Now, anyone volunteer a question? Or shall I go straight to the Ambassador and Councillor Pamela? Anyone? I can't see. Is there anyone who wants to talk? I think, of course, yes, very much.
Good evening. First, I'd like to congratulate you all for this panel. And since the host of the panel talked about democracy, I would not allow us to avoid the opportunity to use the chance to validate this opportunity of democracy. And so I would like just to propose a very simple question. And first, I would like to introduce, I'm Rodrigo Costa. I work for FINEP. a public enterprise related to the Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation. And of course, our main goal, our mission is to foster science, technology and innovation in Brazil. When I see these terms, economy, trade, innovation, sustainability, in general, I think in a different order, beginning with sustainability, and then we go to innovation, and then we go to economy and trade. It's a little different order in my way of taking a look at this. But from where I work, maybe the innovation is the closer term of this from where I work. And when we take a look at Switzerland, we see Switzerland as, in general, the #1 country for innovation in the world. And when we take a look at some numbers of Switzerland, it's almost the same size of the state of Rio de Janeiro. And when we take a look at the population, it's somewhere between our city population and our state population. But you are still the #1 in the global index for innovation. So I would like to ask for you is, which tip would you give us and as an entry, a first tip to help us to translate, maybe education is the first tip, I don't know, but maybe it's the first clue, the first tip for us to guide ourselves to a better place and the rankings of innovation. That it's maybe, for science, Brazil is really very good, but for the innovation, we're still developing our way to achieve a better place. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Good question. Ruth, do you want to take it on?
Yeah, I can start, and maybe Matthias will afterwards comment on that. You are right. There are several elements. I don't want to give recommendations, but maybe I can talk a little bit how our setup is, and maybe you take and choose what you think would be best then for Rio. If we look at our country, then education, we have a very particular system with apprenticeship, etc. And I think that makes us, that's one element which makes us strong. But a little bit more in general, we are a very open country. We are open for trade. Protectionism is not something in our DNA. And I think there it starts already to have a liberal labor market will mean we have talents. And in all that, combined with openness, curiosity, legislation which allows to be innovative, to have technology, go back to education with our universities, with the ETH and EPFL, which are globally, in the global ranking, also on the top. So it's a combination of several elements. But I think the openness, and we have members of the parliament here as well, the openness in legislation is key in order to allow other companies to come to Switzerland, our companies to go out of Switzerland. And actually, in the end, if we look at trade and also we, Switzerland, as an export nation, it's the only chance we have. We don't have a market of 200 million people in our own country. So also back in other centuries, in former centuries, export was a key to grow, for prosperity, etc. And so it would be now interesting to hear what you take out of that. Maybe we can follow up at the cocktail. I just look at Matthias. Is there anything you would?
No, I would just be repeating after you. I mean, it's access to talents, and that's certainly the regulatory framework, stable framework conditions, and we have that in Switzerland thanks to a government that is, very mindful and does not go in one way or another very quickly, so very stable, very predictable, optimal conditions for investing. There are also some challenges in Switzerland, obviously, which the government is addressing. So I think all in all, it's something which is rather trivial. It's just good, optimal framework conditions, and it's having the right talents that can also come to work in Switzerland. That is just crucial.
Thank you, Matthias. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for the panel. And I send the ball back to you.
Thank you so much, Winston. Thank you so much. I appreciate the discussion was awesome. And I think we actually did have a very fruitful debate as we were hoping for. And now I invite Ambassador Mauricio Lira for his closing remarks. Afterwards, we're going to have Councillor Guy Parmelin, but we begin with Ambassador Mauricio Lira, please. If you want to stay, because afterwards we're going to have a picture, the family photo. So please don't go.
After such a, I would say, rich discussion, I have only to say thank you for SEBRI for the invitation. It was a pleasure to be here and to listen so many interesting remarks about the bilateral relations, about the bi-regional relations between Mercosur and EFTA. And I hope we have good news ahead. Of course, the potential of the relations between Brazil and Switzerland is huge, is incredible, as we mentioned here. It's a very good remark by Apex, the fact that we are really below average in terms of the potential for bilateral trade. So we have much to do. And I thank the organizers, also the government of Switzerland, for the invitation. Thank you very much.
Now, please, Monsieur Parmelin.
First of all, thank you to the members of the panel. It was very interesting. These interesting discussions we have just witnessed were an excellent illustration of the benefits, potential benefits of a free trade agreement between EFTA and Mercosur. Such an agreement would not only strengthen our economic relations, it would also certainly make an important contribution to sustainable development. And both our countries, and we heard the members of the panels, already share an excellent collaboration in the area of sustainable development, and we should build on this. This event and my whole trip showed in an impressive way how active and committed Brazil is in matters of sustainability, and we should take the opportunity and the platform the EFTA-Mercosul agreement provides to showcase this commitment. I'm confident that we will find solutions which will ensure the backing necessary in Switzerland. We are very close to the finish line, and I am committed to also go the last mile. Let's unlock the immense potential this free trade agreement promises and take our already strong relationship to the next level by finalizing the free trade agreement. I will not repeat what Ambassador Liria said, but I think we must work hard in the two countries to finalize this agreement. But parallel, the relations we already have today must be deepened. I'm sure that we are working already very good. We must deepen these relations in the interest of our respective population. Thank you for organizing this event, And I hope you have a wonderful photo of the panel, and we can see that in your rooms and repeat. It was a good thing, but we must finalize all this element and this project of free trade agreement. Thank you very much.
And before the photo, Ambassador Pietro Lazzari would like to invite you, make an invitation, please.
So thank you very much, Mr. Minister, Secretary. Inspiring discussion. Thank you, panelists, and thank you to Sabri. History was mentioned several times, bilateral history, and when Swiss people live in Brazil, they get tropicalized. And Brazilian living in Switzerland as well, they adopt our use and customs. Now we started yesterday mixing up Swiss wine, Swiss cheese, and food from the Cerrado. And tonight we're going to be not only carioca, but also talking about sustainability. I'm very pleased to invite you to the cocktail and to share some of the fantastic food from Santarém with the chef Saulo. So thank you very much. Muito obrigado e vamos compartilhar o cocktail e a comida suíça brasileira com um toque de vinho suíço. Muito obrigado.